Thankfully, did not get a whole lot of signatures on that petition, so it didn't go anywhere. We never hired anybody, but I find it really interesting that the square where he's buried really doesn't have any Spanish moss, if any at all. I've been doing this tour for a little over a year and a half, and I've only seen maybe a piece or two here in the square, and it hasn't lasted more than a day or so, which is pretty interesting. We'll go a square over, you'll see some there. We'll end a square back that way. You'll see a ton of it along our path tonight. It's all over Savannah, just not here in Johnson Square. There is an explanation for that. People do say that they see him out here at night, bending over, picking up the moss, sometimes even climbing a tree and running away with it. I guess he's just cleaning up his area, and we've got to respect that. Now, if you know anything about this moss, it's got little red bugs in it, which is not a good thing. You don't want to be playing in the moss. So if you feel like doing a good deed, you might try to stop this guy from getting in the moss, picking it up, getting his hands in it. But even if you try to get his attention, you're not going to make eye contact with him. He's not even going to turn around to look at you or talk to you. I guess he's just, doing his thing. So we'll let him ride with that. Let me know if you see him out here at any point. But we'll go ahead and get going to our next stop. Please let me know if y'all have any questions, any comments, or if you just want to talk. I'm here for you guys. Feel free to fill in over here if you'd like. Alrighty, folks. We've made it here to Reynolds Square. Pardon the locusts who are interrupting me. But what we are here to talk about is actually behind me here, which is the Pink House. Now, folks here are very creative. They've named that the Pink House Restaurant. Has anybody been there to eat or heard of the Pink House?
Heard of it.
Yes, it's a good spot. Locals love it, tourists love it, so I know it's a good spot. But before it was a restaurant, it was a bank. Before that, it was an antique store, and many years before that, it was a family home for a guy named James Habersham, his wife, and their 8 kids, which is a lot of kids. Might make sense as to why the house takes up half the block here, but there's a more likely reason for that, which is Mr. Habersham's ego. He thought a lot of himself and of his family. He had relatively new money here in Savannah from his new successes as a merchant. And believe it or not, the entire downtown, this historic district with all of our squares were very intentionally planned out. But even what was off the squares was originally planned out as well. We were supposed to have a few townhomes, a business, maybe a church on a corner, a large corner estate, and that was supposed to kind of repeat around the square. So this corner estate was a very wanted thing, a very coveted thing. Mr. Habersham bought this land, built this house. It took 11 years for this house to be built. But once it was done, it was kind of everybody's treat, because this is where you wanted to spend your weekends here in Savannah. Friday nights here were guys' nights. You'd have all the businessmen come over and maybe talk shop a little bit, mingle a little bit. And Saturday nights was a lot more fun. You could bring your wife, your kids. You have a lot more people here in the house. And you could not get inside of the house just because it was packed full of people. Apparently it was just as fun here in the square, packed with people who could not get inside of the house. But all of them, don't you worry, are having a good meal or a good drink on the Habersham's dime. So they were obviously very loved people here in Savannah. I mean, if you're throwing parties every weekend, I don't know how you can't love these people. But all this partying came to a screeching halt when Mr. Habersham unexpectedly and unfortunately passed away in the basement of the home here. And that's unfortunately all I can tell you for fact about his passing, because there's 2 stories as to what had happened. The first story is the story that the family told, which is that he had been finding help. He had gotten sick leading up to the days of his passing, but not to worry, that it was very peaceful. But then another story started kind of swirling around Savannah. Apparently it came from somebody who worked within the home, that something had happened to him that the family was trying to cover up. Now, it's no surprise that after this rumor starts kind of swirling, there was no funeral for Mr. Habersham, which obviously would have been very well attended by all the party goers here. No autopsy for him either. They locked the doors, they closed the curtains. Not a member of the family was seen leaving the house for nearly a year and a half after his passing, and no one was allowed inside of this house for nearly a year after he passed. Apparently his own mother did not get to come and say her goodbyes to him. So, that kind of shows you how tight of a ship that they were running here at the Habersham's house after he had passed away. Unfortunately, to this day, their efforts really worked because, hello, I'm being outperformed. But their efforts did really work because still to this day, we don't know exactly what happened to Mr. Habersham. But we do know that he still likes to hang out here quite a bit. A very common occurrence is for wine glasses to tip over wine bottles to fly off shelves. Another really strange thing that happens here more often than people would like to admit is that people will be in the bathrooms here, maybe go try to open the bathroom door, go back to your lovely dinner, and that door will just not open. This is a very old house, more than most likely it's unlevel, but even in an older house, you can kind of give a door a kick, get that door to open up. That's not the case here. You'll try to kick the door, you'll try to open the door with your hardest force. Nothing's going to open it. So some of us have phones. You go try to text somebody, come get me out of this bathroom, and as soon as you send the text, you open the door, open. No problem at all. So, that's interesting. I've had a couple people tell me that they've heard heavy breathing on the other side of the door, or even seen some steps on the outside, which is always interesting. But one very interesting story about this house here is that of a bartender, still works here to this day. He said that this guy was coming in every night for about a week and a half straight, dressed in colonial-looking clothing, which is not unthinkable here in Savannah. We have quite a few guys who dress up in old-timey clothes, just for the history of it. But he was coming in, and he always seemed to disappear before he had paid his bill. Now that's not a ghost story, that's just a bad guy story. But of course, this bartender takes it to the manager. He says, "Do you know this guy? Did you tell him that he could have a free meal?" And the manager had no clue who he was. He said, "You've got to kick him out." But at the end of the night, he kicks this guy out, and he kind of lets his curiosity get the best of him because he follows him out of the pink house through this square where we are standing, a couple of blocks down that way, and when he gets there, he feels sick to his stomach, like maybe he's going to pass out or something. He takes a seat on one of our lovely benches, but when he stands up, this guy is just gone. I can see all the way across the square. Surely I can see somebody who took just a couple of steps away from me, but he does not. He gets in his car, rides around the cemetery, walks around the cemetery, just doesn't see him, and he thinks, maybe I'm super tired. It's been a long week, and he doesn't think anything of it again. So a couple of months later, some ladies are here taking pictures, taking selfies, and when they're scrolling through these photos, they notice somebody in the background who they did not recognize, who looks like maybe he was dressed up in a costume or something. Of course, they show this photo to their bartender, making a joke about it being a ghost. Everybody knows Savannah is a very haunted city, one of the most haunted cities in the United States, as a matter of fact. And of course, this bartender does not find this the least bit funny because he recognizes the person in that photo as the same person who was coming in and out and disappearing all those weeks in a row. Now is probably a good time to tell you that that area where this person who was dressed up led our bartender to was actually Colonial Park Cemetery, which is where James Habersham is buried. Don't worry, we'll see it tonight. But I do encourage you guys, if you're able to, get some photos of the pink house. Looks like lots of folks are getting photos there tonight, so I encourage us not to cross the street here. Let me know if y'all have any questions about the pink house. We'd love to talk about it. Yeah, I'll move out of your way so I'm not modeling. The line leader. If you guys don't mind kind of scooting down a little bit just so we can try to fit most people here. If you cannot fit against this wall, absolutely fine. I just ask that we leave a walkway for the folks who are not on it. These guys are great. Alrighty guys, well we've made it here to Broughton Street, arguably one of our busier streets here in the historic district, so I apologize in advance for any loud cars or motorcycles that want to come by and show off. If somebody does come by like that, I'll just take a beat, let them do their thing. I can't compete with that. But it is not a ghost tour in Savannah if we don't stop and talk about the Marshall House, which is right here across the street. Is anybody staying there tonight?
Sorry.
No takers? Man, okay. Well, the Marshall House here was constructed by a woman. Her name was Mary Marshall. Like I said, the people here in Savannah, very creative. King House, Marshall House, you know, back to basics. But unfortunately for her, timing was not in her favor, as construction here wrapped up just about the peak of the Civil War in Savannah. So nobody's looking to come here, everybody's looking to get out of here. So it's not good for business if you're running a hotel, of course. So a little brief history blurb for you. You may know the name General Sherman of the Union Army, who's leading his infamous March to the Sea, burning everything in his path. He is coming through the South, he's burning cities left and right, and he's coming to Savannah next. We are not excited about this, but when he gets here, he actually goes a little bit lighter on the city of Savannah and gives us as a Christmas gift to President Lincoln. So it's good, but he's brought some people with him, these troops. They need accommodations. So what is the Marshall House here? General Sherman actually meets with Mary Marshall, and she allows him to use this as the Union Hospital. So the very first people who stayed here were not guests, they were patients. It was always a good time. Now, of course, there's just one doctor who works at this hospital here. By all accounts, he's a very interesting guy. He likes to walk around town with, you know, extra blood on his apron to show off how good of a doctor he was, which I'm not a doctor. I don't know if I would believe that myself, but still an interesting little fact about him. He also likes to brag about the work that he is doing, sometimes in a little bit too much detail, kind of makes people uncomfortable. But all that being said, it was said if you're not about to meet your maker here in the lobby, he would kind of pick through and find somebody who's a good candidate for an amputation. You know, get your arm chopped off, your leg chopped off, a little scary there. But he would kind of convince people who maybe did not need this. Either way, if you were selected, you would get a fast pass up to the 4th floor of the hotel, which at this point in time was one very large room. It did not have all the hotel room walls built yet, so it was just one big surgical room. Now, I've never had surgery before. I hear it's not very fun, but these were particularly, you know, not a good time because there was no anesthesia. So you unfortunately were awake for this, and there was no germ theory. They did not know that germs existed, so they were not washing off their tools like they should have been. Now, this does not make you a very successful doctor. About 30 to 40% of people actually survive these amputations that happen here, especially during this time period. Of that surviving 30 to 40%, an additional 5 to 10% will pass away from infections with germs. Now, of course, this leads to a lot of catastrophes up on the 4th floor here. Thankfully for us, a lot of good ghost stories up there. There's a lot of accounts of people saying that they felt something in their room, maybe heard something walking around their room. I had somebody tell me a couple weeks ago that she heard somebody pacing in front of their door throughout the entire night, which could have been, you know, a Savannah party goer. But one undeniable thing about the Marshall House here is that we have a lot of complaints of people on the 4th floor who are staying there alone, waking up with their sheets rolled to their knees, kind of like they're getting ready for surgery. And I don't like that very much. Now, there is factual backing to this. In the 1990s, they did a full renovation of this hotel, top to bottom. And when they get to the bottom here, they do a little bit of digging, and they hit a couple of roadblocks here. Now, what are these roadblocks? Unfortunately, bones. Lots of bones. They actually find a total of 9 bodies here in the basement after all of this time, which is very impressive to still have them down there after this long period of time here. Wait for traffic here. But of course, they locate all of these bodies here in the basement. They call the medical examiner to come in, pick them up, figure out when these bodies are from exactly, and they are dated back to the Civil War period here in Savannah. But this is very obvious to the people who have found these people here, because a couple of them still have uniforms on them from their Civil War period, which is pretty cool. But if you're the owner of the hotel, what do you do about these uniforms that they found in your hotel? You know, get rid of them, keep them? Well, he keeps them, he puts them in a frame, and he displays them in their lobby today. So if you guys have some extra time, maybe accidentally stumble in there. Unfortunately, they don't love our big groups coming in there and checking out the hotel, but it is something worth seeing. You can see the uniforms on the wall there, which is pretty fun. Now, this is not the only tragedy that's taken place at the Marshall House here. Yellow fever was a huge issue here in Savannah. And each time it hit us pretty hard, taking about 10% of our population each time. Now, of course, by this sort of third wave of yellow fever here in Savannah, we start to get smart and we get all of our sick people together, kind of like in quarantine. So that's what we used the Marshall House here for after it was a Union hospital. Specifically, the second floor here was for children who had yellow fever. And although they had a lot more doctors, this disease was not very survivable. And unfortunately, we lost just a couple of lives up there on the second floor. So now I would like to tell you about one very bad week here at the Marshall House in 2017, which is a little recent for comfort for me. It all starts here in room 214. Mother and her son are staying here. He's kind of in the bathroom, but he runs out to her screaming, and of course she asks him what's wrong, what's going on here. And he had a huge bite mark on his elbow. And that didn't make a lot of sense, because how many of us can bite our elbows? Don't worry, we'll do our party tricks at the end. But of course, she's asking him who did this to him, and he said, I was talking to my buddy, we were playing, and then he bit me very hard. But they didn't bring any friends with them on the trip. He didn't have any siblings. They didn't even meet anybody in Savannah that day. And so they packed up their things and they're going to leave, which I think is a good idea. So of course they come down and they complain to the people who are working at the front desk here. The people who are working at the front desk, unfortunately, are not paying them a whole lot of attention, which is what you would want to happen if you're complaining. You want somebody's attention, of course. But that's because people who are working at the hotel are already backed up with a lot of other complaints, all coming from the second floor here, of people going downtown and coming back and finding their rooms completely differently than how they had left them. TV's on at full volume, clothes out of their suitcases, shoes lost only to find one under the bed and one in the closet. It just looked like a whole mess, or maybe somebody had gotten fired and then just done, a big scene there on the second floor. But housekeeping had not hit these rooms just yet. Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
But housekeeping had not hit these rooms just yet, so that was a little interesting. And you don't want a lot of people to complain about your hotel. That's not good for business, of course.
Wow, I love it. Man, I feel, wow, thanks.
Yeah, they're getting all these complaints. You don't want this to happen for your business, of course. And so they're trying to combat this, and then they get complaints that rooms 214, 314, and 414, which is that whole row of the first A in Marshall House, all apparently stink, like something had died, or it looked something was rotten. Something was just smelling a little bit off in these rooms. So of course they have cleaners come in, deep clean these rooms. It doesn't really touch the smell. They replace the carpets, the bedding, the artwork in these rooms, even the cell phones they replace in these rooms. Nothing is really touching the smell. They have somebody crawl through all the vents to make sure nothing got up in there. They can't find anything that's causing the smell. So what do you do at this point to try to get rid of a smell? There's so much air freshener can do, right? So they look to horror movies, scary movies, to come look around, see what they can do. And they go find the priest from the beautiful cathedral here to come in, bless these rooms, bless the Marshall House. He comes in, he blesses those 3 rooms and the hotel in general, and apparently as soon as he leaves, 314 and 414 quit stinking almost immediately, and 214 still stinks until the next Sunday. It's always a good story about the Marshall House. I encourage you guys to get photos while you're here. I just ask that you don't walk too far this way. But let me know if y'all have any questions about the Marshall House. Is anybody changing their reservation tonight? I will say I've stayed here before, and I actually stayed on the 4th floor. I was by myself. I was coming down for a job interview before I lived here, and I did wake up in the middle of the night with my sheets on the floor. And I'm a very calm sleeper. I wake up, it looks like you made the bed around me, but that was interesting. to take a little semicircle here. That would be great. There might be people who walk past us. If somebody does walk past, you know, you guys know the drill. Clear the way for them.
Yeah.
But we have made it here to Colonial Park Cemetery. I think I heard somebody mention that the gates were open earlier. That is true. Their summer hours here are 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. So unfortunately they are locked up for the day. But I think we've got a really good view of what's going on in here through these lovely gates. Colonial Park Cemetery was a functional cemetery from 1750 to 1853 when it had its final burial due to it being completely full at full capacity. But if you're looking in, you're thinking I'm probably just lying to you because this is a tour, but I promise there's a lot more below the surface than we can account for above it with some headstones here, which is always fun. Now we have a couple of reasons why our headstones here are missing. Does anybody know where Savannah's first planned cemetery was? You're correct, we did not have one. As I mentioned, all of our squares and everything were planned out, but we forgot a place for a cemetery. We initially started settling Savannah a little bit closer to the riverfront there, which means that this was originally kind of on the outskirts of town. But as Savannah grew and we started moving inland a little bit, we realized that this would have been a great piece of property to build some townhouses on, but obviously we've got a cemetery here. So we stopped burials here around 1800, and we told people who have family members buried here, if they would like to, they can come in, take their family member's headstone, do the dirty work of taking their coffin over to our cool new cemetery called Laurel Grove. And in doing so, about 500 people took 500 people out of here over to the new cemetery. But obviously, not everybody was taken. I mean, look in here, we've got quite a few people left over here. And so they realized that this plan was not going to work. They did a little bit of accounting, and they noticed, though, that they had a lot more headstones missing here than they had people at the new cemetery. Meaning that people were coming here, taking a headstone over to the new cemetery, getting a discount on a family plot, which was promised to people if they had moved from this cemetery to the next, and then discarded of that headstone however they saw fit, which is very disrespectful, but it is funny to think that they were scammers in the 1800s. Now, another reason for our headstones being missing here is that this was a Union campground for Union soldiers during the Civil War. Of course, with your soldiers come horses and packs, things like that. You know, they're probably knocking over headstones left and right. That sounds like a really fun game. This is enemy territory to them. And then one final little fact about our headstones here is weather. Weather happens, especially over the course of some 100+ years. Anytime that a headstone is knocked over and we can't place it back into the ground, we actually take it directly back this way. There is a brick wall lining that edge of the cemetery, and it is lined with headstones. Now, there's nobody buried in that wall, but it's just kind of a fun thing to point out, kind of a creepy thing to look at. Y'all seeing some flying squirrels here? Oh, we've had flying squirrels here the past couple of nights. Oh, some bats too. Classic. Does anybody want to guess how many people are still buried here in Colonial Park today? You can shout it out. A little higher than 50. 300? A little higher? Oh, higher than that. There are an estimated 10,000 people buried here at Colonial Park Cemetery to this day. We get that number from a ground penetrating sonar team. They came in from South Carolina. They gave us that number of 10,000 people here. They also gave us the number of 25,000. That is the total number of people estimated to be buried in this historic district. Now that does include the 10,000 people here, but that's still 15,000 people out there somewhere, which is a lot of people. That makes Savannah a city built on its dead, or a fancy word being necropolis. That's a lot of people out there, which makes us one of the most haunted cities here. Now, one other fact that they gave us is the number 3, much smaller number, but still a little bit alarming, because that is the total number of mass graves here within Colonial Park. Only one of these is marked. It's got a lovely little marker that was donated by a church. It says, "Here lies the bodies of 56 people," which is a lot of people to be buried in one spot. But that sonar team will tell you that there's about 666 people buried in that grave. But the marker was donated by a church, so it makes a lot of sense as to why they wanted to round down a little bit. 666 had a good look, of course. Now, I don't know if that was on purpose or if it was just coincidence, but it's one of the many fun facts about Colonial Park here. Now, what would happen in all these mass graves were kind of attributed to the yellow fever epidemic. We had a lot of people passing away from this sickness. And it kind of changed the way that we handled how people passed away or how to handle ourselves after that. But what happened is every morning the hearse would come by, hear ye, bring out your dead. And if someone in your home had passed away, you'd bring them out, give them to the hearse folk, then bring them here, bury them in this large grave, and repeat until it was filled full of people. But if you had money, this whole large grave situation was not going to be for you. More than most likely, if you had money, you had picked out a family plot for your family to be buried in. You might have some parents or grandparents already buried there, but kind of have that picked out. You would ask to be buried in a coffin, and then you would ask for one little special thing, which is for a string to be tied around a finger or a toe, and that string would run up above ground attached to a bell. That way, if somebody had made a grave mistake and accidentally buried you alive, you could wiggle your fingers and your toes, ringing that bell, and then if somebody working the graveyard shift would hear that bell, run over, dig you up, get you out, pat you on the back, and send you on home. Which is a pretty interesting and intricate system for that time period. And we don't have any records of anybody being saved by the bells here. But even if today, if you were to walk through the cemetery, you wouldn't see any bells still standing. These gates, as you guys have seen, they close up at 8, so if you guys don't mind leaving a little bit of a walkway for our friends here. These gates were put up in the year 2000, so about 26 years ago, after a big uptick in people coming in and robbing graves, digging up stuff that they probably should not have been, and even finding a couple of interesting candles or spooky things going on in here. So they put up these gates, but even when they put up these gates, these bells were already long gone and stolen out of the cemetery. But that does not mean that we don't still hear these bells ringing. The story goes, you'll be in here, hear a very faint ringing of a bell, you run, try to track it down, get to where you feel like you're standing kind of on top of it, and then it just cuts out. And it picks up on the other side of the cemetery. You run over there, try to find the bells, and it just cuts out again. I've had people tell me that they've been able to go back and forth with these bells. I know I sound like a crazy person. I promise they're not paying me to say this, but I have heard the bells in here just once, and I wasn't running back and forth, but I did hear it once. It was during broad daylight, and I was with people. So I don't think you have to be alone at night to be, in that kind of scary situation. Very fun. Now, last little thing about Colonial Park here is that when people are walking along the edge of the cemetery here, sometimes people get an overwhelming sense of sadness or feeling like they might almost cry. Sometimes even taking photos here, people's photos are messed up, they're missing, or they're black screens. People have had cameras die here, phones die here. There's something here that just very much so does not like us or our technology very much so. We believe that to be a boy who'd love to come here and hang out named Rene Rondelier, which is a mouthful of a name. But he liked to hang out here, unfortunately, passed away very young. But we think that he's kind of confused by us here and by our technology. But that feeling or that messing with our technology will follow you until you get about 2 blocks out of the cemetery, which is very specific even for a ghost boy. But that is because Colonial Park originally expanded 2 blocks that way, 2 blocks behind me, and 1 block behind us here, which means that we are standing on Savannah's oldest residence right now. Everyone say hello. The cemetery did originally expand out towards this way, but Savannah has a very fun habit of paving over burial sites and people, and that's obviously not a good thing, but that does kind of account for all of our people who are buried all over Savannah. Now, if for some reason you guys were checking the news about a month ago, they're actually doing an additional bit of research into the square that's got a big gazebo in it. I believe it's called Whitfield Square. They found nearly 80 people who were buried in that square alone. Now, the biggest instance of this was actually in 2022. They renamed a square to Taylor Square, and in doing so, they found a pauper's grave, so people who could not even afford a headstone or a casket at that time, with nearly 900 people in it. Now, this is not marked, but they are all still there. Even if you're doing construction here and you find a body, you take it down to the medical examiner's office, it's dated, and if it falls within the historic time period, you put them back, and you just got yourselves a free neighbor. But that does conclude my stories of Colonial Park. Please let me know if y'all have any questions, and I will be over here if y'all want to take any photos. about the length of a square to walk, but I do like to point out one little thing on our walk here, which is right here. Now this probably doesn't look like anything special, but it is a part of one of Savannah's biggest unsolved mysteries, which is our tunnel system. Believe it or not, Savannah has a tunnel system, but we don't know a whole lot about it. We don't have a map of the tunnel system. We don't know exactly what it was built for. We do suspect that it was used at some points in times for trade. We have an entrance down onto the riverfront here. We have an entrance by the old hospital off of Forsyth Park. If you guys have been to Forsyth Park, beautiful place. But it runs over to the old hospital there, the old Candler Hospital. But we don't have a map. We're not allowed in them anymore, unfortunately, because we did use these tunnels at one point in time to bury more folks who passed away from the yellow fever. So don't try to go in there. But I like to point it out because it's kind of fun that a city has tunnels and we don't really know what they're there for. The only place that you can see the tunnels currently is at the Pirate's House restaurant. No, I'm not being paid to say this, but even if you want to walk in there, check it out. There's an area where you can look down and see into a tunnel, and that's as far as it'll take you. But we'll keep going. Made it here to one of my favorite squares. This is Chippewa Square. I'm not sure, some of us have probably seen the movie Forrest Gump. It's a very famous movie that was filmed here in Savannah. A big part of the movie is this guy named Forrest Gump who's sitting on a bench, and that bench in the movie was actually placed right behind us here where that sign is. I'm sure if you guys are turning around, you don't see a bench there. Unfortunately, Savannians were not very kind to this bench, but we have taken it and it's in a safe place in our welcome center today, so have no fear, it's in a good spot. But if for some reason you're a super fan of this movie or you go home and watch it from the beginning, there's a feather that floats down from the top of that church's steeple that we walked past there, all around this area where it lands in front of Forrest, right there. And in the background behind Forrest, you can see this monument right here, which somebody pointed out looks a lot like a pirate or something, but that is actually supposed to be James Oglethorpe, who is the founder of the colony of Georgia as well as the city of Savannah. Savannah was really his baby. He's the reason for all of our squares. So if you get lost in the squares, it is his fault. Obviously, he cared a lot about the design of the city, but he even cared a lot about kind of the people here and sort of the vibe of the city and what we all kind of thought together. So some of those big things that he wanted to instill into us, he had 3 big no-nos, and that is that he was anti-lawyer. He did not like attorneys or lawyers, at least at the beginning of his time here. The next thing was that he was anti-Catholicism, or people who were Catholic. Being a Protestant Christian was all the rage, and so he strongly encouraged people here to follow the same faith as him. Of course, you guys looked around. We've got lots of beautiful cathedrals here, so that did not stick very long. And then the last thing was that he was anti-alcohol, so no drinking or partying. But if you've been here for 5 minutes or you've looked around a little bit, you know that none of these 3 things actually stuck for very long. But it is fun to kind of point out his original intentions or ideas for Savannah, and it does come into play a little bit for our final story tonight. But while we are here, while you guys have got a seat at least, we'll talk the first part of one of my favorite stories tonight, which is that of the Foley House Inn. Don't worry if you cannot see it from here. We will take a lap through the square and see the house kind of to wrap up our story, but I figured take advantage of a seat while we've got one. But this is the Foley House Inn. If you guys can see it through the trees here, it is a brick building, a red brick building with a green awning over the entryway door. Currently it functions as an inn where you can go and stay if you come back to Savannah anytime soon. But before that, it was originally built to be a family home for a woman named Honoria and her newlywed husband, Owen Foley. They built this house, and thankfully it did not take nearly as long as the pink house to be built. But just a couple of months before it was move-in ready, Owen passes away from
Yellow fever.
perfect. Now, you guys have got that good, but this was not a good thing for her. It leaves her completely heartbroken, and it said if you walk past her house, day or night, you can see her crying or talking to his portrait there in the foyer. Kind of like we would maybe look at a picture of someone today, she would look at his portrait there in the foyer. But he does leave her with a gift, and that is that she has to find the local brick mason, so the guy who puts all the bricks together, maybe somebody who did this ground here, to come in and touch up some places on the outside of the house and finish the fireplace on the inside. She hires this guy named Charles, who is the guy that you want to hire for all the brickwork here, and he comes 3 times over the course of 2 months here to her house. First time he comes, I guess he kind of does like a consultation, gets an idea, maybe starts a little bit of work, and she asked him, what she owed him for his time. He said not to worry about it, and she didn't think a whole lot of this. Her husband had just passed away. He's probably doing something very kind for her. But he comes back the second time, once again, kind of wraps up the job there, and she asks him, what's the bill looking like? How much should I pay you for this time? And he says, don't worry about it. She tries to give him food or clothes, and he will just not take anything. So that raises a few red flags, but he comes back the third time, completes the job. He's about to leave, and she asks, what the total is. How much is this whole project going to cost me? You've never even told me. Once again, he says, don't worry about it. So she asks him, surely you're not making a living off of making nothing. And he said, it's actually the opposite. You haven't offended me in any way. There's not some reason I'm running to get out of here. Honoria was one of the most beautiful women in Savannah, and I guess he was trying to shoot his shot by doing some free work for her. But they do not go out on a date, or they don't take it any further, but we will keep him in our back pocket for a little bit later, so don't forget about Charles the brick mason. He's a brick mason, she's a socialite, she just was not interested. But about a year goes by, and a guy named Thomas moves to Savannah. Thomas is from New York City, of old New York money, but what people here do not know is that money that his family comes from is very quickly running out. So they've sent Thomas down here to find himself a nice, rich wife to replenish the family fortune before people can start to catch on in New York. But he gets down here, he makes himself familiar with a lot of the bars, the restaurants, the hangout spots, and he makes a group of buddies who all like the kind of same things that he likes. Going out to restaurants or pubs, all that good stuff. Well, they kind of get together, they get together every night, but then he remembers, okay, I came down here for a purpose, and he hears of this woman, Honoria, who is beautiful and pretty rich. She's got deep pockets, she's got this beautiful house here. And I guess that checks his 2 boxes, because the day after hearing about her, he runs down here to her house, walks up the steps, knocks on the door, and asks her out on a date like many men had in between Charles and Thomas, all of which she had rejected and turned down. But there was something different about Thomas, I guess, to her, because she accepts this date. They go out on a date together, and if the chaperone were here, she would tell you that before they could get to, casual conversation, tell me about yourself, how's your week been, he just proposes. I guess he knew what he wanted and he was going to go after it. Of course, she says no to this proposal. That's a fairly quick way to start things off, and her husband had passed away only a year ago. She's not looking to get into anything too quickly. But she says, maybe we can come back to this a little bit later. It was honestly kind of an awkward situation. But he takes her up on this. He starts showing up here at her house week after week, day after day, then multiple times a day, asking her out on another date, demanding to see her or bringing her gifts, and it kind of gets to a point where it maybe would have gone from cute to creepy. But once again, he still doesn't quite pick up that she's not interested in him anymore, and so he's thinking she's just playing hard to get. He gets his mom's engagement ring shipped in from New York. Apparently it was the last nice piece of jewelry that their family owned that they did not have to sell off yet. And so he gets it shipped in, he shows it to his group of buddies that he has here, bragging about it, and they tell him that nobody could turn down a ring like that. So he takes this literally, he leaves the pub that he was at, he comes down here, walks up her steps, knocks on her door like he had many times before. But at this time, it's about 2 or 3 in the morning. And of course, Honoria is probably asleep at this point. So, even if she was awake, she likes to hang out on the 4th floor of the house, so she probably did not hear this knock at the door. So what does he do? Thomas Well, he decides to let himself in, climb up to the 4th floor, and wake her up with a proposal. Now, of course, she says no. I don't know anybody who would say yes to that. That's kind of creepy. And this time, it starts to set in that she is really not interested. This is not going to happen. He's going to keep trying, and she's going to keep saying no. And he does not take this very well. He starts to get very angry. He's throwing things around the room. He's tearing things off the wall. He's yelling at her. And instead of running out, she kind of hangs back to try to have a conversation with him, maybe calm him down a little bit. But that conversation, unfortunately, does not happen because his anger starts to turn from, tearing things off the wall and throwing things around to her. He starts to come closer to her. With every step he gets closer, she's trying to find herself out of this room as quickly as she can, but she realizes she is not going to get out of this room in time, so she grabs the nearest thing that she can, which is a brass candlestick, takes it, big heavy thing, whacks him over the head with it, and that was that for Thomas, which I guess is good for her. But the next morning, those buddies of his come by, asking about the proposal, asking about wedding plans, and of course she tells them that he had come by and that she told him no, that he should probably get back going up to New York because it was getting a little embarrassing for him. And they bought this story. The buddies did not look for him any further. They didn't even get together a search party for him. Those are bad friends, by the way. But that is where our story here ends until the 1980s here, which is about 95 years after all this takes place, because Honoria abandons her house here, and then she sells it, and then in the 80s, the house is purchased. But we will walk over to the house because I don't really think that we can finish the story without looking at the house here. So, sorry to leave you guys on the cliffhanger, but I promise the ending is worth it.
Is it this up? This one here? Okay.
But this right behind us here, that is the only house in. We've got the green awning over the door there, and that's where all of this took place. But in the 1980s, they purchased the brick building and the white building next to it, just two different houses, believe it or not, with the intention of making it the full opposite, which is what it is today. So they purchased these two pieces of property, and what do you have to do? You gotta tear down a wall. They tear down the wall, and behind that, you find a second wall, which is kind of a fire proofing tactic here in Savannah, kind of a cool historic find in Savannah. So they tear down that wall, they find a third wall, which nobody had seen before, but Josh got it done. They tear down the third wall though behind that, which is not a fourth one, they find a gun and a brass candlestick. This does make the newspaper so free to fact check me, and they nickname the guy that they found on his wall, just pretty funny. But of course, they don't take him out of there, and actually, turns out finding somebody on your property stops up construction for some time. They were losing out money. They put the wall back up between these two houses, and they sold off the white house, which makes the old house in, which is today, just as it once originally was, just a brick house here. So that goes into a little bit about Honoria, this lady who lives here. Kind of unfinished. As I mentioned, she runs away from Savannah and moves up to Macon. And when she shows up there, she shows up with her husband. That doesn't make a lot of sense because, her husband passed away at the very beginning of her story. She doesn't show up as a ghost. She shows up with a guy named Charles. She's got a big ring on her finger to prove it. They live together. They live quite a long life, actually. They're buried right next to each other up in Macon, Georgia. They died within a couple of years of each other. And probably Charles was the first Mason who came and did that work in the beginning, who had a crush on her. I guess that she probably got in contact with him and said, hey, I have a bit of an odd job for you. Could you possibly put the person off on my fourth floor, build me an extra third wall here, and get me out of Savannah before people can catch on? And I'll repay you with my love and affection. So I think this nice thing made so it worked out. Nobody thought of this for just a few years. She had passed away, so I'm stuck with her. Now, as for ghost stories, we don't get a whole lot happening there today, but sometimes the area right by the entryway door, people feel very uneasy. That's not where they found the abilities here. Additionally, there's a painting there. I promise I can see this painting mounted to the wall. It is and it's on a stud. It's built to one of those studs. But the painting is not going anywhere, but it falls off what time. For the last little bit of the whole crossing, interesting, does have it on the fourth floor. And people will wake up in the middle of the night to a blood-curdling scream, like somebody just saw a big bug or something. But of course, you open the door, see your neighbor who's also opened up the door, check on each other, are you okay? Okay, good night. There's no explanation for that. But we will go ahead and get moving to the next stop up here. Right Square. It's our final stop tonight. And this was formerly known as the Justice Square. So this is where all the legal things were taking place during their colonial period here in Savannah. Now, if you want to time travel a little bit, across the way there is a building with sort of an arched or circular entryway. That was our first courthouse and our gallows. And behind us here there is a CVS. That was where our first jail was. So this is really where all the legal stuff was happening. But I'll back it up even further. Of course, Savannah has a population now. These people have to come from somewhere, and a lot of people are coming over with a lot of different ideas and intentions. One of which is a guy named William Wise, who is a merchant over in England. Although not a very well-respected one, he started taking money from people and not delivering as he was supposed to. So this makes people upset, and he decides that his best option is to run from these people that he is upset. So he knows that he's welcome here over in the new colony of Georgia, and he arranges for himself and some nieces and nephews to come on over here and start fresh. Might I mention that Mr. Wise was about 70 years old at this time, so that's a big journey for him to take. But he gets here, and he is faced almost immediately with James Oglethorpe, who is our founder. I mentioned him back in our last square here. And James Oglethorpe recognized William Wise almost immediately, and that is not a good thing. They were enemies back over in England. Now, I don't think it's very smart to go to your enemy's colony, but that is just me. But he gets here, and we actually have letters of James Oglethorpe writing back to government officials saying that William Wise stank, that his hair needed to be combed, that he maybe had lice, that his teeth were very gross. Apparently, he was kind of writing bad things about him, but he did have a reason to say very unkind things about him because, remember I mentioned those nieces and nephews that he brought along with him, those were not his relatives at all. They were his indentured servants. James Oglethorpe initially was against slavery here in the colony, so he's not happy about this. He says, you know what, we've all made it here alive. That's kind of an accomplishment in and of itself, but you're not going to stay here in the colony with us. We're going to move over to Hutchinson Island. I don't know if you guys have been down onto the Riverwalk yet, but if you go onto the Riverwalk and you look across the river, there's a large convention center. That is Hutchinson Island. That is where they sent him to go live. But he is allowed to take his indentured servants with him. Two of these indentured servants have kind of become buddies. One is a young woman, her name is Alice Riley, and another is a young man, his name is Richard White. They're both Irish, they have flaming red hair, they've become buddies. Having a bad boss can do that. And so they start to talk because they want out of the situation. Apparently, Richard was promised freedom on arriving here, but William has not followed up on his promise. And so they think maybe we can swim across this river, but even if we make it across without drowning, because we don't know how to swim, somebody could very well recognize our bright red hair and send us back over there to William. He's not going to be very happy about us going away. So they kind of think ahead, and one day, a perfect circumstance comes up. One of Alice's daily jobs was to brush through William's long, gross hair, and what she does, she calls in Richard to come and give him a nice clean shave of his beard. He gets him all shaved up, and Richard decides to take one final cut. Right there. Oof, is right. Now, this sets a record here in the state of Georgia because this is the first recorded murder in the colony of Georgia. But that's not a record that you want to set. It starts a manhunt for the both of them because somehow they have escaped off of Hutchinson Island. They're caught over in Skidaway Island, which is about 15 minutes from where we're standing right now. They're caught only because Alice was trying to sell off William's belongings with a WW monogram on them. But they're caught, they're brought here to the Justice Square, as I mentioned, and they're kind of paraded around it, it's like, we got him kind of a moment, and they're taken to the courthouse for their trial. It's nothing like a trial that you guys would learn about today in our history. As I mentioned, James Clark did not like lawyers, so they did not have representation, and it's no surprise they were both found guilty of murder. They were sentenced to have their end right then and there. So they bring up Richard, ask him for his final words, and he's got just 2 words. He apparently said,
What are your final words?
Well, a bit late for that. These people have made up their minds. They carry out his sentence, and then they bring up Alice. They ask Alice for her final words. She's also got 2, but she says some interesting 2 words. She says, I'm pregnant. Well, very good timing to tell us that. Of course, nobody really believes her, but just to be safe, they take her from the courthouse over to CBS jail, where they let her stay there until it turns out that she was telling the truth, that she was going to become a mom. But these next 9 months were not very kind to her. People start a rumor that she is a witch, that the baby is somehow going to curse the city or kill the city.
Is that when that started, where they started thinking
her or
Mama was
this
witch?
child, they're making up and it's running wildly around the city. It's the big gossip, People didn't have TVs or phones, so it's kind of
Why
the
did they
thing
think
to
that
talk
she was a
about.
witch?
But we'll make way for these folks to come through here.
They should know that. It just really looks so
Best club I've got, her. Rest of them, sir. And my name is the governor, and she's the princess.
Thank you guys. But of course, time does come for her to have her baby, and she does. And unfortunately, the baby is taken from her and handed over to a nurse. She never gets to know her baby or even name him. She's thrown into a cart and she's brought here to the square to have her sentence carried out. And people are packed in the square. They're wanting to see how this whole saga is going to end. They ask her once again for her final words. This time she has a lot more than just 2 to say. She starts speaking in her native tongue, Gaelic. She's Irish. And she's saying, I curse the city of Savannah. I curse that it be a city built on its dead. I curse that the people who live here have a long, horribly lasting life for 150 years to come, and then I will haunt them. And of course, we don't want the people of Savannah hearing these curses, so they carry out her sentence and they take her body after she had passed away, and they bury it actually where the Collins Quarter restaurant now stands. We walked right past it. It's about in the street. It's a great restaurant, if you ask me. But I do think that her curse is very much so ring true. They're very much the city built on its dead, 25,000 and counting. If you ask a Savannian, they will tell you that the square itself is cursed. Part of that is right behind me here, this lovely building. They've been doing construction on that for about 2.5 years now. The first week doing construction there, the second floor completely collapsed onto the first floor, and thankfully nobody was in there, but if somebody was there, that would have ended their story. But thankfully we're out of that 150 year of a horribly lasting life, but now we're in the period where she haunts us, and haunt us she does. Alice is our most well-known ghost or spirit here in Savannah. People will see her almost like you would see a person. She'll come up and ask, could you please help me find my son? He's just kind of gotten away from me here in the square. And if you feel like helping her out, you know, you'll look high, you'll look low. These bushes kind of look fun for a kid to hide in. Don't get any of those guys. And then you don't see this kid, so you turn around to tell his mom that, and she's gone. That's gotten some people, you know, kind of worked up, so much so that they will call the Savannah police here. But the police are so used to these calls that they'll send out their rookie cops or their new cops to kind of play a prank on him or trick with them, because they know when they get here, they're not going to find anybody. But I promise, my uncle was on the police force here for a couple of years, and they got these Alice calls. That's literally what they call them, about 4 or 5 times a week. And that's just the people who are calling. So that does conclude my stories for you guys tonight. A couple of quick things before I turn you loose to hunt. If you're turned around, we started in Johnson Square, which is right back that way. If you need to be told, I'm actually heading back that way too. My husband's over there. But if you're working on those, there's a couple of things that you can do. Firstly, I would love a 5-star review. If you enjoy the tour, my name is Chloe. If you did not enjoy the tour, my name is Zoe. I'm just not harassing Zoe. And then lastly,
tell her that our dog is Chloe?
Feel free to turn to the local well.
I'll tell her.
Maybe they will call you home. Maybe they're already where you're staying. I don't know. But thank you guys very much for coming out tonight. You've been a lovely, lovely group. And I'll have a wonderful rest of your time in Savannah. I'll be back if y'all have any questions. Thank you guys. Thanks, girl.
I find myself standing awake alone, wishing I were not. I'm giving up on searching for you, because all the trouble